Get back on that truck or before I throw you on it myself, Colonel Nathan Holloway roared, ripping the girl's file in half and hurling both pieces into her face. He kicked sand across her boots, then shoved her shoulder hard enough to stagger her sideways. They sent me a child and called her the future of this program. This desert has buried real men, and now I'm supposed to babysit a teenager. 40 soldiers laughed. Elena Marlowe caught her balance, straightened slowly, and looked him dead in the eye without a word. Before we go further, please subscribe to the channel and follow this story all the way to the end, and comment the name of the city you're watching from right now so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Elena Marlowe did not flinch when the laughter hit her. That was the first thing that unsettled them, though none of them could have named it in the moment. A child was supposed to shrink. A child was supposed to look at her boots or blink too fast or let her lip tremble the way people do when 40 grown men decide all at once that she is a joke. Elena did none of those things. She stood exactly where the transport had left her, with her small canvas bag over one shoulder, and she let the laughter roll over her like heat off the sand, and she waited for it to burn itself out. "You hear me, kid," Holloway said. "I said go home." "I heard you, Colonel," Elena answered. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I'm not going home." The laughter cracked and thinned. A few of the men glanced at each other. It was one thing to laugh at a girl who took it and folded. It was another thing entirely to laugh at a girl who answered you in a voice that steady. Holloway crossed his arms. He was a big man, wide through the shoulders with a gray crew cut and forearms, like coiled rope, and he had spent 26 years teaching men to kill from distances most people couldn't imagine. He had trained snipers who went on to become legends inside a world the public would never hear about. He had buried some of them too. He did not think of himself as a cruel man. He thought of himself as an honest one, and honesty to Colonel Nathan Holloway meant telling people the truth about themselves before the desert told it for them. "Let me explain something to you," he said, walking a slow circle around her. "This program is the hardest sniper trial in the region, not the state, the region. Men come here from the best units in this country, men with combat tours, men who've already proven they can do the job, and this place breaks 2 out of 3 of them inside the first week. Not because they're weak, because it's designed to break them. And somebody somewhere decided the person to represent the future of that program is an 18-year-old girl who has never worn a uniform in her life." "That's correct," Elena said. "That's correct," he repeated, and he laughed again, but it came out flatter this time, more air than sound. "You think this is a good idea?" "I think you don't know me yet," she said. "That's the only thing I'm certain of, Colonel. You don't know me yet." A young corporal higher the back muttered something to the man beside him, and the man snorted. Elena did not look at them. She kept her eyes on Holloway, calm and gray, and completely without fear. And Holloway felt something he did not want to feel, which was curiosity. "What's your name again?" he said, though he had read it twice. "Elena Marlowe." "Marlowe," he said it slowly. Something moved behind his eyes. "Any relation to Daniel Marlowe?" For the first time, the smallest change crossed her face. Not fear, not pride. Something more private than either. "He's my father," she said. The room went quiet in a different way now. Not the quiet of men holding back a laugh. The quiet of men who had heard a name they recognized and were trying to decide whether it changed anything. A few of the older soldiers straightened. Holloway's jaw tightened. "Daniel Marlowe," he said again. "Military intelligence, retired 10 years back?" 12. "I knew of him, never met him. They said he could read a battlefield like other men read a newspaper." He studied her. "And you're telling me he trained you?" "Since I was 6 years old," Elena said. "Not to shoot, not at first, to watch, to wait, to notice the things everyone else walks past." She paused. "Shooting came later. Shooting is the easy part." Holloway laughed, but it was a short cut-off thing now because the men were not laughing with him anymore. They were watching. And Holloway had spent his whole life reading men, and he could feel the temperature of the room changing under his feet, and he did not like it. "The easy part," he said. "Yes, sir." "You know how many men have told me shooting is the easy part?" "I don't, sir." "A lot," he said. "You know how many of them washed out in Sector 7 inside 3 days?" "Most of them, I'd guess." "Every single one," Holloway said. He walked back toward the front of the room and picked up her scattered file, gathering the pages without hurry, squaring them against the table. So here's what's going to happen, Miss Marlowe. I'm not going to send you home because apparently that decision is above my pay grade, and I've made a career out of following orders even when the orders are foolish. But I'm going to put you in the hardest sector we have. I'm going to make sure the desert tells you the truth I'm not allowed to. And when you wash out, and you will wash out, I want you to remember that I gave you the chance to leave with your dignity intact. Elena did not blink. Which sector, Colonel? He almost smiled. Sector 7. Good, she said. That one word landed like a slap. Good. Not fine, not okay. Good, as if he had handed her exactly what she wanted, as if she had walked 18 years toward that word, and it had finally arrived. Get her settled, Holloway said to the corporal in the back, and somebody find her a rifle she can actually lift. The laughter that followed was thinner than before. Elena picked up her canvas bag, slung it over her shoulder, and followed the corporal out into the white light of the desert morning, and she did not look back, and Holloway watched her go, and for reasons he could not explain, he did not feel the satisfaction he had expected to feel. The corporal's name was Diaz, and he was maybe 22, and he walked fast on purpose, hoping she would struggle to keep up. She did not. She matched him stride for stride without seeming to try. You really Daniel Marlowe's kid, he asked, not looking at her. I really am. My squad leader used to talk about your dad. Said there was a guy in Intel who called an ambush 3 days before it happened, and nobody believed him. And then it happened exactly like he said, right down to the hour. Diaz glanced sideways. That true? I don't know that specific story, Elena said, but it sounds like him. How's a guy do that? He doesn't guess, she said. Everybody thinks he guessed. He didn't. He watched. He watched the little things nobody thought were important, and he put them together, and by the time everyone else was surprised, he'd already known for days. She looked out at the shimmering horizon. He used to say surprise is just information arriving late. Diaz thought about that. Surprise is information arriving late, he repeated. That's kind of heavy. He's a heavy guy, Elena said. And for the first time there was warmth in her voice, and Diaz found himself almost liking her. And then he remembered she was a joke, an 18-year-old. The whole base was going to watch fail, and he pushed the warmth away. Look, he said, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but you should know what you're walking into. Sector 7 isn't like the other zones. The heat out there does something to your head. The wind changes on you every 10 minutes. Guys with real experience have gone out there and come back not making sense. It's not a place for learning. It's a place for finishing. I know, Elena said. You don't know. That's the thing. You think you know because your dad told you stories, but stories aren't the same as being out there when the sun's cooking your brain and you can't tell how far away anything is. Elena stopped walking. Diaz took 2 more steps before he realized and turned back. Corporal Diaz, she said, can I tell you something? Sure. You're right that I've never been out there, but you're wrong that I don't know it. She looked at him steadily. For the last 4 months, my father made me sit in an empty field outside Yuma every single afternoon in the worst heat of the day, doing nothing. No rifle, no target, nothing. Just sitting, watching the air move, learning what heat does to distance, to my eyes, to my patience. 4 months, every day. Do you know what I learned? Diaz shook his head slowly. I learned that the heat isn't the enemy, she said. The heat is just weather. The enemy is what the heat makes you do. It makes you rush. It makes you doubt. It makes you take the shot early because you can't stand to wait 1 more second in the fire. Every man who came back from Sector 7 not making sense, I promise you, it wasn't the heat that beat him. It was his own hurry. She started walking again. I don't hurry, Corporal. That's the one thing I do well. Diaz did not answer. He did not know what to say. He led her to the barracks in silence, and he showed her the empty bunk in the corner. And when he left, he did not walk fast anymore. That evening in the mess hall, the story of the girl who called Sector 7 good had already traveled to every table. Men who had not been in the briefing room repeated it with their own additions. She was a general's daughter. She was a stunt for the cameras. She was going to get hurt out there, and it was going to be a scandal, and someone was going to lose their career over it. Elena ate alone at the end of a long table, and she listened to all of it without appearing to listen, and she did not defend herself once. A sergeant named Kessler sat down across from her uninvited. He was in his 30s, lean and hard, with a reputation as one of the best shooters on the base, and a temper to match. He set his tray down with a clatter. So you're the famous Marlowe girl, he said. I'm a Marlowe, she said. I don't know about famous. Whole base is talking about you. You know that, I gathered. You know what they're saying. That I'm going to fail, Elena said. That I'm a publicity stunt. That someone made a mistake sending me here. She met his eyes. Did I miss anything? Kessler was quiet for a second. He had come to the table looking for a fight, or at least a reaction, and she had taken every weapon out of his hands by saying the cruel things herself calmly, like she was reading a grocery list. You're not what I expected, he admitted. People rarely are, Elena said. That's the whole problem with expecting. Kessler leaned back. Let me ask you something, kid. And I want a real answer. Not a tough line, a real one. He lowered his voice. Are you scared? Elena set down her fork. She thought about the question the way she thought about everything without hurry turning it over. Yes, she said finally. Kessler blinked. He had not expected that. Of course I'm scared, she said. Anybody who says they're not scared out here is either lying or too dumb to understand what they're doing. My father taught me that fear isn't the enemy either. Fear is just your body telling you the truth, that this is dangerous, that this matters, that you could lose. The trick isn't to not be scared. The trick is to be scared and steady at the same time. She picked her fork back up. Most people can't do that. They think steadiness means the fear goes away. It never goes away. You just stop letting it drive. Kessler stared at her. Something in his hard face had shifted. He had been shooting for 15 years and he had never heard it said better. And it was being said to him by an 18-year-old girl in a mess hall who had never fired a shot in combat. Who are you? He said quietly. It was not really a question. I'm nobody yet, Elena said. Ask me again in 2 weeks. Kessler picked up his tray. He stood. He looked down at her for a long moment, and then he said something that surprised both of them. Watch the eastern ridge in Sector 7, he said. There's a false wind that comes off the rocks around noon. Feel steady. It isn't. It'll pull your shot 2 feet right at long range, and you won't feel it happen. Half the guys who wash out, that's what gets them. They trust the eastern wind. Elena looked up at him. Why are you telling me this? Kessler shrugged, uncomfortable now. I don't know, he said. Maybe because you told the truth about being scared. Nobody tells the truth around here. He walked away before she could answer. Elena sat alone with the rest of her meal and she filed the words away carefully. The eastern ridge, a false wind at noon. Trust nothing that feels steady. She did not know yet whether Kessler was helping her or setting her up. Her father had taught her to be grateful for information and suspicious of the reasons behind it both at the same time. So she thanked the information and questioned the man, and she finished her meal and she went back to the barracks to sleep. She did not sleep much. She lay on the thin mattress and listened to the men breathing around her, and she thought about her father 1,200 miles away in a small house outside Yuma, sitting on the porch the way he did every night, and she wondered if he was thinking about her. She knew he was. He had not wanted her to come. That was the thing none of these men knew. Daniel Marlowe had trained his daughter for 18 years to be exceptional, and then when the chance came, he had begged her not to take it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, he had told her standing in the driveway the morning she left. Not to them, not to me. You already know what you are. That's supposed to be enough. It's enough for you, she had said. It's not enough for the world. The world doesn't take your word for it. The world makes you show them. The world is cruel that way. Then let me be cruel back, Elena had said. Let me be so good they can't laugh anymore. Her father had looked at her for a long time in the gray morning light, and then he had done something he almost never did. He had pulled her into a hug hard the way you hold something you are afraid to lose. Whatever happens out there, he had said into her hair, the desert doesn't decide what you're worth. You already decided that. A long time ago. Don't let a bunch of scared men with rifles tell you otherwise. They're not scared, Elena had said. They're the most scared people you'll ever meet, her father had answered. That's why they laugh. Frightened men laugh at what they can't understand. It's the only defense they've got left. He had pulled back and looked at her. You'll see it. When you rattle them, they'll laugh harder. And that's how you'll know you're winning. Lying in the dark of the barracks, Elena replayed those words, and she thought about the way the men had laughed in the briefing room. And she thought about the way the laughter had thinned when she answered Holloway steady, and she almost smiled. Frightened men laugh at what they can't understand. She was going to make them understand, and she suspected they were going to hate it. Morning came hard and fast, the way it always did in the desert, the sun cracking over the horizon like it had somewhere to be. Elena was awake before the others' dressed boots, Lace sitting on the edge of her bunk, with her eyes closed, breathing slow. Diaz found her that way when he came to wake her. "You're up," he said, surprised. "I've been up. Holloway wants you on the range at 0600, shooting evaluation." Diaz hesitated. "He's going to watch. Everybody's going to watch. He set it up that way on purpose." "I know," Elena said. "You know a lot of things," Diaz said, and there was less mockery in it than there had been the day before. Almost something like respect, trying to be born and not sure it was allowed. The range was already crowded when Elena arrived. Word had spread. Men who had no reason to be there had found reasons. They lined the back of the firing area in a loose crowd, arms crossed, waiting for the show. Holloway stood at the front with a rifle in his hands, and when he saw Elena, he held it out to her without a word. She took it, and the first thing she did before she looked at a single target was turn the rifle over in her hands, slowly examining it the way a doctor examines a patient. "Something wrong with my rifle, Miss Marlowe?" Holloway asked, loud enough for the crowd. "Yes, sir," Elena said. A ripple went through the men. Holloway's eyebrow lifted. "Is that so?" "The scope's off," she said. "Someone adjusted the elevation turret. Maybe by accident, maybe not." She looked up at him and her gray eyes were perfectly calm. "At 200 meters, it wouldn't matter much. But you're not going to have me shoot at 200 meters, are you, Colonel?" The crowd went silent, because she was right. Holloway had handed her a rifle with the scope deliberately thrown off a small cruelty, a way to make sure the girl embarrassed herself in front of everyone on her very first shot. He had done it quietly that morning, and he had told no one. And here she was, an 18-year-old who had held the rifle for 30 seconds, calling it out in front of the whole base. "How do you know it's off?" Holloway said. His voice had changed. The performance was gone from it. "Because I know what a zeroed scope feels like in my hands," Elena said, "and this doesn't feel like one. May I correct it?" For a moment, Holloway did not answer. The men were watching him now, instead of her. He had built this whole morning as a trap, and the trap had closed on empty air, and worse, it had closed in front of everyone. "Correct it," he said. Elena's hands moved over the turret without hesitation. She did not fumble. She did not second guess. She made 3 small adjustments, each one deliberate, and then she lowered herself into position on the mat, and she settled the rifle against her shoulder the way you settle into a chair. "You have sat in 10,000 times. 5 targets," Holloway said. 300 meters, whenever you're ready. Elena did not fire right away. She lay still. She breathed. She watched the tiny movements of the heat shimmer them, way the air bent the light, and the men in the back began to shift and mutter because she was taking too long, because a real shooter would have fired by now, because maybe the girl was frozen after all, maybe she was going to choke. And then she fired, once, a pause, twice, a pause, 3 times, 4, 5, it's around. She had not rushed a single shot. Between each one she had waited, breathed, watched and released only when the world was exactly the way she needed it to be. The range officer walked out to check the targets. He came back slowly. He looked at Holloway. He looked at Elena. And then he said the number that would travel across the entire base within the hour. 5 hits, he said. Dead center, all 5. Tightest group I've seen on this range in 2 years. Nobody laughed. Nobody said a word. Elena stood, brushed the sand from her knees, and handed the rifle back to Holloway. "Thank you for the correction, Colonel," she said. And the way she said it, calm, and even made it sound like she was thanking him for a gift, though everyone there knew he had tried to sabotage her. Holloway took the rifle. He was not laughing now. He was studying her the way a man studies a card player who has just done something impossible, trying to figure out where the trick was, and slowly realizing there was no trick. There was only skill he had refused to imagine. "Who trained you?" he said. It was the 3rd time he had asked some version of that question, and this time it was not a challenge. It was closer to surrender. "You know who trained me," Elena said quietly. "But my father didn't teach me to shoot." "Not really, anyone can teach shooting. He taught me the other thing. The thing you can't teach most people because they won't sit still long enough to learn it." She looked out at the targets. "He taught me how to wait." Holloway said nothing for a long moment. "Sector 70800 tomorrow," he said finally. "We'll see how your waiting holds up when the desert's trying to kill you." "Yes, sir," Elena said. And she walked off the range with her head level and her shoulders square in behind her, The crowd of men who had come to watch her fail stood in a silence none of them quite knew how to break. Kessler caught up to her near the barracks. He fell into step beside her without asking. "That was the calibration trick," he said. "He does it to everyone he wants to break early. I've watched him do it a dozen times. Never seen anyone catch it before they fired." He shook his head. "How'd you know?" "You already know how I knew," Elena said. "You told me yourself last night. Nobody tells the truth around here. So I've learned to check everything for myself." She glanced at him. "The rifle was lying to me. I just listened." Kessler laughed, a real laugh, this time surprised out of him. "The rifle was lying to you." "Everything lies," Elena said, and there was no bitterness in it, only calm. "The rifle, the wind, the heat. Your own eyes, most of all. My father used to say the desert is one long conversation with liars, and the only way to survive it is to stop believing anyone and start measuring everything." She stopped at the door of the barracks. "Thank you for the tip about the Eastern Ridge, by the way. You believed me." "No," Elena said, and she smiled small and real. "I wrote it down. There's a difference. I'll find out tomorrow whether you were telling me the truth or setting me up. Either way, you gave me something to measure." She went inside, leaving Kessler standing there, and he found to his own surprise that he was not offended. He was impressed, and under the being impressed, quiet and unwelcome, was the first cold thread of something else, something the whole base would come to feel over the next 2 weeks, which was the growing suspicion that they had all badly misjudged the girl who stepped off the transport, and that the desert trial they had been so sure would break her was about to break something else instead. It was going to break every assumption they had ever made. That night, Holloway sat alone in his office with Elena's file open in front of him. He had written 3 times now. On paper, she was nothing, a civilian, no service record, no combat, no rank. On paper, she should not be here. But Holloway had stopped trusting the paper somewhere around the 5th perfect shot that morning. He picked up the phone and made a call he had not planned to make to an old contact from his own years in the service, a man who had known Daniel Marlowe. She carried the Barrett herself, the long 50 caliber rifle balanced across both arms, and she set it down at the firing position with a care that made a few of the watching soldiers frown, because it wasn't the movement of someone nervous. It was the movement of someone who'd done this so many times that her hands knew the ritual without her mind having to tell them. Captain Mercer was already there, prone behind the spotting scope, and as she settled in beside him, he murmured something to her that the crowd couldn't hear. "You ready, Sergeant?" "Give me a minute with the wind, sir," she said. And then Madeline Carter did the thing that later so many of them would remember and be unable to explain. She went still, completely, utterly still. The crowd behind her buzzed and shifted and laughed and waited to see her fail, and she simply left them. She lay down behind that rifle and she stopped being aware of them at all. She watched the grass on the distant slope, the way it bent and released. She watched a hawk riding the thermals over the valley, reading the invisible rivers of air, the way she'd read them 1,000 times. She felt the cold on her cheek and knew what it meant for the density of the air, for the way her bullet would fall across nearly 2 miles of empty space. Holloway hung up the phone slowly. He looked at the file one more time, then he closed it and he sat in the dark of his office for a long time thinking about the girl who had called Sector 7 good, and for the first time in 26 years, Colonel Nathan Holloway felt the cold, unfamiliar weight of being wrong about someone, and knowing it and not yet being ready to admit it out loud. Outside, across to the base, in a barracks full of sleeping men, Elena Marlowe lay awake one more time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind pick at the corners of the building. She thought about the Eastern Ridge. She thought about the false wind Kessler had warned her about. She thought about the heat that had beaten better shooters than her, and she did not feel afraid exactly. But she felt the truth of it, the weight of what was coming, and she let herself feel it fully instead of pushing it away, because her father had taught her that the fear you refuse to feel is the fear that runs you, and the fear you sit with quietly becomes just another piece of information. One more thing to measure. She closed her eyes, she breathed slow, and somewhere in the last minutes before sleep, she heard her father's voice the way she always did when the world got heavy, calm and certain and completely without doubt. "They'll laugh," he had said, "right up until the moment they can't. And when they stop laughing, Elena, when the whole room goes quiet because you've done the thing they swore you couldn't do, don't gloat. Don't say a word. Just look at them. let the silence be your answer, because a person who has to tell you they were right was never really sure. The ones who are sure just let the truth stand there and speak for itself. Elena breathed out slow and even, and the desert wind pressed against the walls, and tomorrow was coming, and she was ready for it, more ready than any of them knew, more ready than she had let a single one of them see. They had laughed at a child stepping off a transport. They were going to remember it as the last easy laugh they ever had at her expense. And the desert, the great cruel desert that had broken so many better men, was about to meet the one person in the world who had been trained since the age of 6 to do the only thing that ever truly beat it: to wait, to watch, and to never ever hurry. Sector 7 took its first swing at Elena Marlowe before she had walked 100 yards into it. The heat came up off the ground like something alive, and by the time the sun cleared the eastern ridge, the air itself had started to lie. Distances stretched and shrank. A rock 200 yards away looked like it was floating. Elena had felt heat before out in that empty field near Yuma, but this was different, and she knew within the first 10 minutes that Diaz had been telling the truth about one thing. Sector 7 was not a place for learning. It was a place for finishing. Holloway had come out to watch. He stood at the edge of the sector with 3 of his senior instructors, arms crossed, saying nothing. And the message was clear enough without words. He wanted witnesses. He wanted men who could confirm later exactly how and when the girl fell apart. "She's already sweating through her shirt," one of the instructors said. His name was Vargas, a wide-sore man who had washed more candidates out of the program than anyone on the base and seemed to enjoy it. 10 minutes in, she won't last the morning. "Give her time," Holloway said. He surprised himself by saying it. "You defending her now, Colonel?" "I'm not defending anybody," Holloway said. "I'm watching. That's what we're out here to do." But he heard the edge in his own voice, and so did Vargas, and Vargas filed it away. Out in the sector, Elena had stopped moving. She had found a low ridge of rock, and she had settled behind it, and she was doing the thing that the men watching could not understand and could not stand to watch. She was doing nothing. She lay flat, rifle beside her, and she watched the air. "What is she doing?" Vargas said after 2 minutes. "Is she frozen? Is that it?" She froze. "She's not frozen," Holloway said quietly. "Then what?" Holloway didn't answer because he wasn't sure he could explain it in a way Vargas would accept. "She was reading it." That was the phrase his old contact had used on the phone. Danny Marlowe read the world like it was written down for him. And now his daughter was lying flat on a ridge in the worst heat of the day, and she was reading the sector the way other people read a page, and every second she waited was driving Vargas closer to the edge of his patience. The first target appeared at 400 meters. A steel silhouette popped up by a remote trigger one of the instructors held. Elena did not fire. "Target's up," Vargas said. "Target's been up for 5 seconds. 10. What is she waiting for?" Elena watched the heat shimmer bending the light around the target. She watched the way the air moved between her and it, and she waited because her father's voice was in her head. The voice that had sat with her through 4 months of empty afternoons telling her the same thing over and over. "The shot you rush is the shot the desert wanted you to take. Wait for the shot the desert doesn't see coming." At 14 seconds, the shimmer settled for half a breath. She fired. The steel rang. Vargas shut his mouth. 400 clean, Holloway said. He didn't smile, but something moved behind his eyes. The second target came at 500 meters, and this time it was harder because a crosswind had picked up the kind of wind that felt like it was coming from one direction, while it was actually coming from another. Elena felt it on the back of her neck. She did not trust what she felt. She watched a strand of dry grass 40 yards downrange, watched the way it bent, and she read the real wind off the grass instead of off her own skin, because her skin was a liar and the grass was not. She adjusted. She fired. The steel rang again. 500 clean, Holloway said, and now there was something in his voice that Vargas didn't like at all. By the time the third target fell at 600 meters, the men at the edge of the sector had gone quiet. This was not how it was supposed to go. Candidates out here were supposed to rush to panic, to burn through their focus, like men burning through matches in the wind. Elena Marlowe was doing the opposite. Every shot she took, she seemed calmer than the last. She was not spending energy. She was gathering it. And then the noon wind came. Elena felt it shift, and something in her went very still. because she remembered. The Eastern Ridge. Kessler's warning whispered across a mess hall table the night before. There's a false wind that comes off the rocks around noon. Feel steady. It isn't. It'll pull your shot 2 feet right, and you won't feel it happen. The fourth target had just risen at 700 meters off to the east, right in the throat of the ridge wind. Elena settled the crosshairs on it, and she felt the wind on her face steady, even honest as anything. Every instinct she had told her the air was calm and true. She did not believe her instincts. She held. She's got the shot, Vargas said. Clean line, no shimmer. What is she doing? She's got it right there. Wait, Holloway said almost to himself. Elena held for one more second, and then she did something none of the men watching could explain. She shifted her aim. Not much, just a hair. She moved her point of impact 2 feet to the left of the target into what looked like empty air, and Vargas actually laughed a short, ugly bark because the girl had just aimed at nothing. The girl was about to miss a stationary target by 2 feet like an amateur. She fired. The steel rang dead center. Vargas's laugh died in his throat. Because the false wind had been there all along, invisible silent pouring off the eastern ridge exactly the way Kessler had said, and it had grabbed the round in flight and pushed it 2 feet right, and Elena had known, and she had aimed left to let the wind carry it home. She had shot at empty air and hit the heart of the target, and she had done it because she had listened the night before to one honest man in a mess hall full of liars, and she had written it down. That's not possible, Vargas said. His voice had gone thin. There's no wind. I'm standing right here. There's no wind. There's wind, Holloway said quietly. You just can't feel it. She can. It was 12:14 in the afternoon, and out on the base, the story of the girl who shot at nothing and hit the center was already beginning to travel, and by the time she walked back off the sector, it would have reached every corner of Red Canyon. Elena rose from behind the ridge. She was soaked through with sweat, her hands were steady, and she walked back toward the men at the edge of the sector, without hurry, without triumph, the way her father had taught her. She did not gloat. She did not say a word about the impossible shot. She simply walked up to Holloway and she waited. 4 for 4, Holloway said, including a 700-meter shot through a wind that wasn't there. It was there, Colonel, Elena said. It's always there. Around noon, off the eastern ridge. Holloway looked at her for a long moment. Who told you about the ridge wind? Elena did not answer right away. She was not going to give up Kessler, not to a man who might use it against him. The rocks told me, she said finally. You just have to know how to listen. Vargas stepped forward, his face dark. That's a load of garbage. Somebody tipped her off. There's no way a civilian teenager knows about the ridge wind. That's insider knowledge. She cheated. The word hung in the air. Elena turned to face him, and for the first time since she had arrived at Red Canyon, something flickered in her calm gray eyes, something that was not anger exactly, but was close to its cousin. Sergeant, as she said, let me make sure I understand. I made a shot you couldn't make, and your first explanation isn't that I might be good. It's that I must have cheated. She let that sit. You'd rather believe I broke the rules than believe a girl outshot you. That tells me a lot more about you than it does about me. Vargas's face went red. You little. Enough, Holloway said. It came out sharp, and it stopped Vargas cold, and it surprised everyone, most of all Holloway himself. He had spent 26 years backing his instructors against candidates, and here he was on the 4th day cutting one of them off to defend the girl he had thrown a file at. Vargas turned on him. You're taking her side. I'm taking the side of the steel, Holloway said. The steel doesn't lie, Vargas. 4 targets rang. I heard them. You heard them. Whatever she did it clean in front of all of us. And if you've got proof she cheated, put it on my desk by tonight. Otherwise, you keep that word behind your teeth. He turned to Elena. Get some water. You're done for today. Yes, sir, Elena said. And she walked off toward the water station, and behind her she left Vargas standing in a rage he couldn't do anything with, and Holloway standing in a doubt he couldn't shake, and it was only 12:20 in the afternoon. Kessler was waiting for her at the water station. He handed her a canteen without a word. She drank half of it before she spoke. The ridge wind was real, she said. You told me the truth. I know I did, Kessler said. I was up on the tower. I watched you aim off 2 feet. He shook his head slowly. I've never seen anybody do that on the first try. I told you about it so you wouldn't wash out. I didn't think you'd actually use it to make the shot look like a magic trick. He paused. Vargas is going to come after you now. You know that. You embarrassed him in front of the colonel. I didn't embarrass him, Elena said. He embarrassed himself. There's a difference. Doesn't matter which it is. He's going to see it the same way. Kessler lowered his voice. Watch him. He's washed out better people than you for less. And he's got ways of doing it that don't leave marks. Bad ammo. A range officer who calls your hits as misses. A rifle that comes back from cleaning with the scope walked off zero. He plays dirty and he plays it quiet. Elena capped the canteen. Then I'll check everything, she said, the way I always do. You can't check everything, Kessler said. That's the thing. Sooner or later you have to trust somebody out here, and the second you do, that's the gap he'll come through. Elena looked at him. Are you telling me this because you're on my side, she said, or because you want me to be so busy watching Vargas that I stop watching you? Kessler blinked, and then slowly he grinned, a tired, respectful grin. Your dad really did a number on you, didn't he? You don't trust anybody. I trust measurements, Elena said. I don't trust people. People change their minds. Measurements don't. She handed the canteen back. But for what it's worth, Kessler, you've told me the truth twice now. That's twice more than anyone else on this base. I'm keeping count. She walked away and Kessler watched her go, and the tired grin stayed on his face longer than he meant it to. That night, the trouble Kessler had predicted arrived, and it arrived faster than even he expected. It was 9:40 in the evening when Diaz came running into the barracks breathless. Marlowe, he said, you need to come to the equipment room, now. Elena was off her bunk before he finished the sentence. What happened? Your rifle. The one they assigned you, it's gone. Diaz swallowed. And Vargas is telling everybody you took it off the base. He's saying you removed a weapon from the armory without authorization. That's not a washout, Marlowe. That's a discharge. That's charges. Elena felt a cold drop in her stomach that meant the danger was real. She did not let it reach her face. Take me there, she said. The equipment room was crowded when she arrived. Vargas was at the center of it, holding a clipboard, and Holloway was there too. His face unreadable, and half the base seemed to have found a reason to be standing in the hallway. There she is, Vargas said, loud performing for the room. The magic shooter. Colonel, the rifle assigned to candidate Marlowe is not in its rack. The log shows it was signed out at 1500 hours and never returned. Her signature's right here. He held up the clipboard. That's removal of a military weapon. You want to explain that, Marlowe? You want to tell us where you hid it? Elena did not look at the clipboard. She looked at Vargas. May I see the log, she said. You can see it from there. May I see the log, Sergeant, she said again, calm even. Or are you afraid of what I'll notice? The room went quiet. Vargas's jaw worked. And then Holloway said, give her the log, Vargas. Vargas handed it over like it burned him. Elena studied it. She studied it for a long time, longer than the room wanted her to, and the men shifted and muttered, and Vargas said, see, she can't explain it, she's stalling. This isn't my signature, Elena said. That's your name. It's my name, Elena agreed. It's not my signature. Look at the E. She held the clipboard up and pointed. I cross my E at the top, every time. This E isn't crossed, and the M in Marlowe here loops backward. I don't loop backward. Whoever wrote this signed in my name from memory, but they didn't know how I actually write it. She lowered the clipboard and looked at Vargas. You forged it, and you forged it in a hurry because you didn't have time to study how I sign. That's the mistake. You always rush the small thing. You did it on the range at noon and you did it here. The room had gone completely silent. It was 9:52 in the evening. Vargas's face had drained. That's a lie. That's a wild accusation, Colonel. She's got no proof. The proof is the ink, Elena said. She turned to Holloway. Colonel, the sign-out was logged at 1500 hours. I can account for every minute between 1400 and 1600 because I was on the range in front of Sergeant Kessler and two other instructors cleaning my equipment under supervision, which is required after a live evaluation. I never touched the armory. Pull the range log. Pull the tower footage. It'll show me on the mat the whole time. She paused. It'll also show who walked into the armory at 1500 hours. Because someone did. Holloway looked at Vargas, and something in his face had turned to stone. Pull the tower footage, Holloway said. Colonel, pull it. Now, Diaz, go. Diaz ran. The room waited. Nobody spoke. Vargas stood at the center of the equipment room with his clipboard, and the sweat had started at his hairline. and Elena watched him the way she watched everything without hurry measuring. When Diaz came back, his face told the story before his mouth did. "Colonel," he said quietly, "the footage shows Sergeant Vargas entering the armory at 14:57. He signed out a weapon. He came out at 15:03. Diaz swallowed. The candidate was on the range the whole time, confirmed. 3 witnesses. The silence in that room was the loudest thing Elena had heard since she arrived at Red Canyon. Holloway turned to Vargas slowly. "You want to tell me," he said, and his voice was terribly quiet now, quieter than any shout, "why you signed a candidate's name to a weapon you removed yourself?" Vargas's mouth opened and closed. For all his years of washing candidates out with quiet, invisible tricks, he had never once been caught, and now he had been caught in front of the entire base, and he had been caught by an 18-year-old girl who noticed the way an E was crossed. "She doesn't belong here," Vargas said finally, and it came out as almost a plea. "Colonel, she's a civilian. She's a kid. She's making a mockery of everything we do out here. Every real soldier who came through this program bled for it, and they hand it to a teenager off a truck. I was protecting the program. I was protecting all of us." "You were breaking the law to run a child out of my base," Holloway said. "And you nearly did it. If she'd signed her name the way you assumed she did, if she cut her E the normal way, she'd be facing charges right now for something you did." He shook his head slowly. "That's not protecting the program, Vargas. That's the most cowardly thing I've seen in 26 years. He turned to the room. "Everybody out. Vargas, my office. Now." The men filed out in silence. Elena stood where she was until Holloway looked at her. "You too, Marlowe," he said. "Get some sleep. You've got a long trial coming." He paused. "And for whatever it's worth, which right now isn't much coming from me, I'm sorry I threw your file at your feet on your first day. Turns out you've got a sharper eye than half the men who threw it with me." Elena looked at him. "You don't have to apologize, Colonel," she said. "You just have to stop being surprised. That's all I've ever wanted from anybody. Stop being surprised and start paying attention." She turned to go, and then she stopped, and she said one more thing, quiet, almost gentle. "He's not going to change, you know. Vargas, men like him don't get better after they're caught. They just get more careful. Watch him." And she walked out, leaving Holloway with those words and a sergeant waiting in his office. And it was 10:11 at night. The next morning, the whole base knew. The girl who shot at nothing and hit the center had caught Sergeant Vargas forging a weapons log, and Vargas had been relieved of his instructor duties pending review, and the men who had laughed at Elena 4 days ago now went quiet when she walked past. It was not respect yet. It was closer to fear, the specific fear men feel around someone who sees more than they do someone in front of whom their small dishonesties are not safe. Kessler found her at breakfast. He sat down across from her, and this time nobody at the surrounding tables muttered about it. "You know what you did last night," he said. "I proved I didn't take the rifle." "No," Kessler said. "You did a lot more than that. Vargas has been running people out of this program for years, and everybody knew it, and nobody ever caught him because he was careful and he was mean, and nobody wanted to be his next target." He leaned in. "You didn't just clear yourself. You broke him. In one night with a forged E. Do you understand what that's done to your standing on this base? Tell me." "Half these men are terrified of you now," Kessler said bluntly. "The other half want to be near you because they figure being near you is safer than being across from you. Either way, nobody's laughing anymore." He shook his head. 4 days. It took you 4 days to go from a joke to the most watched person on this base. I've never seen anything like it." Elena drank her coffee. "It's not 4 days," she said quietly. "It's 18 years. It just looks like 4 days from where you're sitting." She set the cup down. "My father used to tell me that people mistake a long preparation for a sudden talent. They see the shot land, and they think it happened in that second. They don't see the 10,000 hours of empty afternoons that made the second possible." She looked at Kessler. "I've been getting ready for this base since I was 6. It only feels fast to you because you weren't there for the slow part." Kessler was quiet for a moment. "Your dad," he said. "What's he like? Because everybody talks about him like he's some kind of legend. And now you're out here doing legend things, and I keep wondering what kind of man builds a daughter like this." Something crossed Elena's face softer than anything the base had seen from her. He's not a legend, she said. That's the thing everybody gets wrong. He's a tired man who did his job for 30 years and watched a lot of people die because they didn't see things coming that he saw coming, and it broke something in him that never healed. And when he had me, he decided the one thing he could do with the rest of his life was make sure I saw everything. So I'd never be surprised. So I'd never be the one who missed the sign. She turned the cup slowly in her hands. He didn't train me to be a great shooter, Kessler. He trained me so that nothing would ever catch me off guard the way things caught him. The shooting is just where it shows up. The real gift is that I'm never surprised. You were surprised last night, Kessler said gently. When Diaz told you the rifle was gone, I saw your face. Elena almost smiled. I was surprised for about 1 second, she said. And then I remembered what my father always says. Surprise is just information arriving late. So I stopped being surprised and I started gathering the information. The E, the M, the timestamps, the footage. By the time I walked into that equipment room, I wasn't surprised anymore. I was just measuring. She stood picking up her tray. That's the whole trick. You're allowed 1 second of surprise. After that, you have to go to work. She walked away and Kessler sat there thinking about it. 1 second of surprise and then you go to work. And he found himself wishing someone had told him that 15 years ago. Holloway called Elena to his office at 11:00 that morning. When she arrived, he was standing at the window with his back to the door, and he did not turn around right away. Vargas is gone, he said, reassigned off the base. There'll be a formal review, but he won't be back here and he won't be running candidates out of programs anymore. Not the way he did it. He turned around. That's because of you. That's because of the footage, Elena said. I just knew where to look. You knew where to look because you're better at this than men who've done it for 20 years, Holloway said flatly. Let's stop pretending otherwise. It's insulting to both of us. He gestured to the chair. Sit. She sat. Holloway sat down across from her, and for a moment he just studied her, this 18-year-old girl who had turned his base upside down in 4 days without ever raising her voice. I made a phone call the other night, he said, to an old friend. Asked him about your father. He watched her face. He told me Danny Marlowe could walk into a room and tell you which man was going to break before the man knew it himself. Said your father saw everything. And then he told me your father spent his retirement pouring all of it into a little girl, and everybody thought it was sad. He paused. It doesn't look sad from where I'm sitting. It wasn't sad, Elena said quietly. It was the most love anybody ever showed me. He gave me his whole life, every single thing he learned, everything that cost him, he handed it to me so I wouldn't have to pay for it the way he did. Her voice caught just slightly, the first crack the base had ever seen in her. People think it's cold the way he raised me. All the discipline, all the watching, they don't understand. It was the opposite of cold. It was a man trying to make sure the world could never do to his daughter what it did to him. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. The final trial is in 10 days, he said finally. It's the hardest thing we do here. Terrain, distance, tactical decisions, all of it under pressure, and the shots go out to distances that most of these men will never make in their lives. I've had candidates with combat tours fall apart on the final trial. He leaned forward. I want to know if you're ready for it, and I want the real answer. Not the tough line, the real one. Elena thought about it the way she thought about everything without hurry. I don't know, she said honestly. I've never done the final trial. I don't lie about things I haven't done yet. She met his eyes. But I'll tell you what I do know. Whatever the desert throws at me out there, I won't rush it. That's the only promise I can make. I won't rush. And in my experience, Colonel, everyone who fails, the hard things fails them because they rushed. So if the only difference between me and the men who fell apart is that I won't hurry, then maybe that's enough. And maybe it isn't. We'll find out in 10 days. Holloway looked at her for a long time, and then he did something he had not done for any candidate in years. He stood up and he extended his hand across the desk. 10 days, he said. Elena stood and shook it. 10 days, she said. And as she walked out of his office into the white desert light, she felt the weight of what was coming settle onto her shoulders. 10 days, the hardest trial in the region. Distances she had trained for but never faced, and she let herself feel all of it fully the way her father had taught her. Because the fear you refuse to feel is the fear that runs you. She was afraid. She let herself be afraid. And then 1 second later, she stopped being afraid and started to work walking back toward the barracks, already planning, already measuring, already turning it 10 days into a problem. She could solve one careful piece at a time, the way she had turned every impossible thing in her life into something she could wait her way through, one slow, unhurried, unbreakable breath after another. The 10 days went fast and then they were gone, and the morning of the final trial arrived the way the desert always arrived, hard and bright and without mercy. Elena was awake at 4:30 an hour before anyone woke her, sitting on the edge of her bunk with her eyes closed, breathing slow. She had done this every morning of her life. Her father called it going quiet before the noise. You empty yourself out before the day fills you up, he used to say. You don't want to walk into a hard thing already full of yesterday's worries. You want to walk in empty so there's room to see what's actually in front of you. So Elena sat and she went quiet and she let the fear come and she let it go. And by the time Diaz came to wake her, she was ready. You're up, Diaz said. He said it every morning now, and every morning he sounded a little less surprised. I'm up. Holloway wants everybody at the staging area by 0600. The whole base is going to be there, Marlowe. Word got out. Half these guys have bets on you. Diaz hesitated. Most of them are betting you fail. I want you to know I'm not one of them. Elena looked at him. In 4 days, he had gone from walking fast to make her struggle to standing in her corner. Thank you, Diaz, she said, and she meant it. There's something else, Diaz said, and his face changed. Vargas is back. Elena went still. He was reassigned off the base. He was, but the final trial's an official evaluation, and he filed a protest with the regional command, said the trial couldn't be considered valid without a senior range officer present who wasn't, quote, compromised by favoritism toward the candidate. Command agreed. They sent him back to observe the trial just for today. Diaz swallowed. He's out there right now, Marlowe, at the staging area, and he's got that look. Elena breathed out slow, of course. She had told Holloway 10 days ago, standing in the equipment room, men like him don't get better after they're caught. They just get more careful. And here he was, careful now, using the rules instead of breaking them, having found a way to put himself right back in the one place he could do her the most harm, on the final trial, as the man scoring the shots. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Diaz stared at her. That's it. The guy who tried to forge you out of the program is going to be the one calling your hits, and all you've got is, okay. What do you want me to say, Diaz? Elena stood and began lacing her boots. That it's not fair. It's not fair. That it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Saying those things doesn't change them. She finished one boot and started the other. There's only one thing that beats a man who wants to call your hits as misses, and it's this. You make the hits so undeniable that even he can't lie about them. You don't leave room for the lie. That's the whole answer. Shoot so clean, there's nothing left to argue with. Diaz looked at her for a long moment. You really are your father's kid, he said. I really am, Elena said, and she stood and she went out to face the desert. The staging area was crowded when she arrived, more crowded than she had expected. It was 5:52 in the morning, and it seemed like the entire base had found a reason to be there. Men lined the ridges above the trial course. Instructors clustered near the equipment, and at the front near the scoring station stood Holloway, and beside him, arms crossed, wearing the sour, patient smile of a man who had found his way back to the hunt, stood Vargas. Holloway saw Elena and walked to meet her, and he lowered his voice so only she could hear. I couldn't stop it, he said. The protest went over my head. Regional command sent him. I want you to know I fought it. I know you did, Elena said. He's going to call your shots, Holloway said grimly. That's his role today. Senior range officer. He calls the hits, he calls the misses, and his word is the official record unless there's cause to overturn it. He paused. I've put 2 other officers on the scoring station with him, and we've got tower footage and electronic sensors on every target. If he tries to call a hit a miss, we'll have the record to fight it. But it's going to be a fight, Marlowe, a formal one. And it'll take days and it'll be ugly and it might not go your way even if you're right. He looked at her. The cleanest way through this is to not give him anything to lie about, Elena said. I know. I already worked that out this morning. She looked past him to Vargas, and Vargas looked back, and the two of them held it for a moment across the staging area. The girl and the man who had tried to destroy her, and neither one blinked. He hates you, Holloway said quietly. You broke him in front of the whole base. A man like that, that's the only thing he can't forgive. Being seen. I know, Elena said. That's exactly why I'm going to beat him in front of the whole base too. It's the only language he understands. Holloway almost smiled. Get to the line, he said. You're up first. That was Vargas's idea, by the way. He wanted you first before you could watch anybody else and learn the course. Good, Elena said, and she meant it, and Holloway shook his head, because he had learned by now that when Elena Marlowe said good about something that was supposed to hurt her, it meant she had already turned it into a weapon. It was 600 in the morning when the trial began. Vargas walked to the scoring station with his clipboard, and he keyed the loudspeaker, and his voice rolled out across the staging area flat and official, and edged with something ugly underneath. Candidate Marlowe to the firing line. The final trial consists of a movement course across difficult terrain, followed by 5 long-range engagements. Targets will appear at ranges from 400 to 1,300 meters. The candidate will engage each target from an unsupported or improvised position. Time and accuracy will both be scored. As senior range officer, I will confirm all hits and misses. He lowered the clipboard and looked directly at Elena. Whenever you're ready, candidate. The message under the words was clear enough. I decide what counts today. Not you, not the steel, me, Baham. Elena walked to the firing line. She did not look at Vargas. She did not look at the crowd. She knelt and she checked her rifle slow and thorough, the way she checked everything, turning it over in her hands, examining the scope. And a low murmur went through the crowd because they had all heard the story. Now the girl who caught the calibration trick on day 1, and here she was checking again, trusting nothing. The scope was true. She had cleaned and zeroed it herself the night before under Kessler's supervision with 2 witnesses and a signed log, because she had known Vargas might be back, and she had left nothing to chance. Movement course first, Vargas said over the loudspeaker. On my mark. The movement course was a brutal stretch of broken terrain, loose rock and sand, and steep pitches meant to exhaust a candidate before they ever reached the shooting positions. So they lay down to make a 1,300-meter shot. Their hands would be shaking, and their lungs would be burning, and their heart would be hammering in their throat. Most candidates arrived at the first shooting position, already half-beaten. Mark, Vargas said. Elena moved. And here was the first thing the crowd did not understand. She did not run. Everyone expected her to run to attack the course, to burn herself out, proving she was fast. She did not. She moved at a steady, relentless, unhurried pace, choosing her footing, reading the ground, never once slipping on the loose rock that had sent other candidates sprawling. She was not the fastest anyone had ever seen on that course, but she never stopped. She never stumbled. She never wasted a single motion. And when she reached the first shooting position at 6:14 in the morning, she was breathing hard, but her hands were steady because she had spent her energy like a miser instead of a gambler. Position 1, Vargas announced. Target at 400 meters. Time is running. The murmur under those last 3 words was deliberate. Time is running. He was trying to make her rush. He knew the way every experienced shooter knew that the fastest way to make someone miss was to remind them of the clock. Elena did not rush. She settled into position. She breathed. She let her heart come down. She watched the 400-meter target through the morning shimmer, and the crowd began to shift and mutter because she was taking time, precious time that was being scored against her. She's burning her clock, someone said on the ridge. She knows what she's doing, Kessler said. He was standing near the scoring station, and he said it loud enough for the men around him to hear. Watch, Elena fired. The steel rang. Hit, said one of the other range officers, immediately reading the electronic sensor. Vargas paused for just a beat too long before he keyed the loudspeaker. Hit confirmed, he said, and the pause told everyone watching exactly what it had cost him to say it. It was the first mini victory, and it was 6:16, and Elena was already moving to the second position. The second target came at 600 meters, and this one she took from a kneeling position on a slope, an awkward, unstable stance that had cost other candidates dearly. Elena built the position, slowly bracing her elbow against her knee, finding the exact point of balance. And she did not fire until she was solid. Then she fired, and the steel rang, and the electronic sensor confirmed it before Vargas could even open his mouth. Hit, the second range officer said. Hit confirmed, Vargas said, tighter now. At 6:29, she reached the third position, and here the trial began to bare its teeth. The third target was at 800 meters, and it was partially obscured, only a sliver of steel, visible past a rock outcrop, the kind of shot that required a shooter to thread a round through a gap barely wider than the target itself. Candidates with combat tours had failed this shot. It was designed to punish anyone whose hands weren't perfectly still. Elena studied it for a long time. "Clock's running, candidate," Vargas said over the loudspeaker, and there was almost pleasure in it now. "You planning to shoot today, or are you just going to admire the view?" A few nervous laughs came from the crowd. Elena did not react. She kept studying the gap, reading the wind, reading the light, and then she did something that made Holloway lean forward at the scoring station. She adjusted her position by a few inches, changing her angle, so that the sliver of visible steel opened up just slightly wider from her new line. She had found a better window, not by shooting faster, by looking longer. She fired. The round threaded the gap. The steel rang. The crowd made a sound, a collective exhale, and even the men who had bet against her made it. "Hit," the second range officer said, and there was something like awe in his voice. Vargas said nothing for a moment. The loudspeaker crackled with dead air. "Confirm the hit, Sergeant," Holloway said loud off to the side, not on the loudspeaker, but loud enough. "Hit confirmed," Vargas said, and his voice had gone flat and hard, and everyone heard the fury in it. It was 6:34 in the morning, 3 targets down, and Elena Marlowe had not missed, and the man scoring her shots was watching his plan come apart shot by shot because there was nothing to lie about. Every hit rang the steel, and every sensor confirmed it, and every eye on the base had seen it. She had done exactly what she told Diaz she would do. She had left no room for the lie. The fourth position was the hardest movement of the entire course, a long climb up a broken ridge to a shooting position that overlooked the far end of the range, and it was here at 6:41 that the trial nearly took her. Elena was halfway up the ridge when the rock under her right foot gave way. It was loose, scree, and it slid, and for one sickening instant she was falling, her whole weight going out from under her, and a gasp went through the crowd. She went down hard against the slope. Her rifle slammed against the rock, and every person watching held their breath, because a fall like that had ended trials before, had broken ankles and cracked scopes and sent candidates sliding back down to the bottom. And Vargas at the scoring station leaned toward the loudspeaker with something eager in his face. But Elena did not slide. She had caught herself. In the instant the rock gave way, some part of her that had been trained since the age of 6 had thrown her weight the other direction into the slope instead of away from it, and she had jammed her forearm against a solid outcrop and stopped her fall before it started. She hung there for a second, breathing, and then she pulled herself up and she checked her rifle fast, her hands moving over the scope, and the crowd waited to see if the fall had knocked it off zero. Elena looked through the scope. She checked it against a reference point downrange. And she made one tiny adjustment, correcting for the impact, and then she kept climbing slower now, more careful, testing every foothold before she trusted it. She caught herself, Kessler said quietly, half to himself. How does anybody catch themselves from that? She wasn't surprised, Holloway said. He was watching through binoculars, and he lowered them slowly. That's the thing, she fell, and she wasn't surprised she fell because she'd already worked out the rock might go. Look at how she's climbing now. She's testing every step. She saw the fall coming before it came. She just couldn't stop it in time, so she'd already planned how to land. It was 6:47 when Elena reached the fourth shooting position, and she was bleeding from a scrape on her forearm, and her uniform was torn, and her hands impossibly were still steady. Position 4, Vargas announced, and there was something desperate under the official flatness, now because his eager moment had passed, and the girl was still standing. Target at 1,000 meters. Time penalty assessed for the delay on the ridge. A murmur of protest went through the crowd because everyone had seen the fall, and the fall was not a delay. A fall was the course doing its job. Holloway keyed his own microphone. The fall is a course hazard, not a candidate delay, he said, his voice cutting across the staging area. No time penalty. Log it as a hazard, Sergeant. That's a direct order, and it's on the record. Vargas's jaw worked. Logged as hazard, he said finally, and it cost him. It was the second twist of the morning, and it was 6:48, and now it was not just Elena against the desert. It was Holloway openly in front of the whole base, standing between the girl and the man who wanted to bury her. The line had been drawn, and everyone had seen it drawn. Elena settled into the fourth position. 1,000 meters. She had made this shot in training out in the field near Yuma dozens of times, but never after a fall, never with blood running down her forearm, Never with a man on a loudspeaker trying to rattle her into a mistake. She breathed. She went quiet. She emptied herself out the way her father had taught her until there was nothing in her but the shot. The wind was moving at 1,000 meters. She read it off the dust off the way the light bent off 100 tiny signs that no one else on that ridge could see. She made her adjustment. She waited for the moment the wind steadied. She fired. The wait between the shot and the sound was long at 1,000 meters, long enough for the whole crowd to stop breathing. The steel rang. The sound rolled back across the desert and the crowd erupted, and even Holloway let out a breath he had not known he was holding. Hit, the second range officer said, grinning now, not bothering to hide it. Vargas stared at his clipboard. The loudspeaker was silent. Confirm it, Holloway said. Hit confirmed, Vargas said, and it came out through his teeth. It was 6:52, 4 targets down, 4 hits, and only 1 target left. And everyone on that base knew what the last target was because it was legend, because candidates talked about it in the barracks, the way people talk about a mountain that has killed climbers. 1,300 meters, through the worst of the desert heat, distortion, and shifting wind, from an improvised position at the end of a course designed to exhaust and rattle and break. Elena climbed down from the 4th position and moved to the final firing line. It was 6:58. The sun was fully up now, and the heat had begun its real work, and the air over the range had started to boil the shimmer, thick enough that the 1,300-meter target was barely visible, a tiny dark smudge that wavered and swam in the distortion. Elena knelt at the final line. She checked her rifle one last time, and then she looked out at the target 1,300 meters away, through a wall of boiling air, and for the first time all morning, she was still for a very long time. Kessler at the scoring station felt his stomach tighten. "Come on, kid," he whispered. "You've got this. You've got this." Vargas keyed the loudspeaker. "Final target, 1,300 meters, whenever you're ready, candidate." And then lower, but still on the loudspeaker, still carrying across the whole staging area, he added, "No shame in taking the miss on this one. Nobody expects a kid to make 1,300. It was the cruelest thing he could have said, and he said it on purpose to plant the seed to give her permission to fail, because permission to fail was its own kind of poison. Take the easy miss. Nobody will blame you. You're just a kid. And here at 7:01 in the morning, with the whole base watching and the man who hated her whispering permission to fail into a loudspeaker, Elena Marlowe did something no one expected. She lifted her head from the rifle. She turned and she looked directly at Vargas across the whole staging area, and she spoke calm and clear, loud enough to carry. "Sergeant Vargas," she said, "you've been trying to make me hurry since 6 o'clock this morning, on the 400, on the 600, on the 800, when you asked if I was admiring the view. You wanted me rushed because rush shooters miss, and you needed me to miss, so you'd have something to score against me." She paused and the whole base was silent. "But here's what my father taught me. The one thing you can never do to a person who refuses to hurry is make them hurry. You can whisper permission to fail into that loudspeaker all morning. I'm not listening to you. I've never once been listening to you." She turned back to the rifle. "I'm listening to the wind." And she put her eye back to the scope, and the staging area went so silent you could hear the desert wind. Itself the same wind she was listening to, and Vargas stood at the scoring station with his mouth slightly open, having just been answered in front of the entire base by an 18-year-old girl who had not even raised her voice. It was 7:02. Elena breathed. She watched the 1,300-meter target swim in the boiling air, and she did not fight the distortion. She read it the way she read everything, waiting for the pattern, waiting for the half second when the heat waves would part and the wind would steady and the desert would show her the one shot it did not want her to take. She waited. The crowd waited. Holloway lowered his binoculars because his hands were not steady enough to hold them. And out at the edge of the staging area, unnoticed by almost everyone, a figure had arrived during the trial and stood watching, an older man with gray in his hair and calm gray eyes exactly like Elena's, a man who had driven 1,200 miles through the night because he could not stay away, a man who had trained his daughter since the age of 6 for exactly this moment and had then begged her not to come, and who now stood at the back of the crowd with his heart in his throat, watching her do the thing he had made her capable of doing. Daniel Marlowe had come to Red Canyon, and he stood in silence and he watched his daughter listen to the wind, and he did not call out, and he did not wave, because he knew better than anyone alive that the last thing you do to Elena in the moment before the shot is give her something new to notice. So he waited too. The whole desert waited. And Elena Marlowe, 18 years old, bleeding from her forearm, at the end of the hardest trial in the region with the man who hated her, scoring her shots, and the father who made her standing silent at her back, and the entire base holding its breath, settled the crosshairs into the boiling air, found the half-second the desert tried to hide from her, and began slowly to take up the last ounce of pressure on the trigger. The trigger broke at 7:03 in the morning, and for a long, long moment, nothing happened. At 1,300 meters, the bullet has to travel almost a mile and a half through the air, and the sound of the strike takes its own slow time coming back. And so there was a gap, a terrible gap, between the crack of the rifle and whatever was going to come after it. Elena did not move. She held her position exactly, her eyes still to the scope, because a real shooter does not celebrate a shot before the desert is answered. She had been taught that too. You don't lift your head, you follow through until the truth arrives. The whole staging area held its breath, and then faint and clear across a mile and a half of boiling desert air, the steel rang. For a second, nobody believed it. The sound was so small at that distance, so far away, that half the crowd wasn't sure they had really heard it. Heads turned, men looked at each other, and then the electronic sensor at the base of the target lit up, and the second range officer stared at his screen, and his voice cracked when he spoke. Hit, he said. 1,300 meters. Confirmed hit. Dead center. The staging area exploded. It was not the polite applause of men watching a good performance. It was something rawer than that, a roar that came up out of the whole base at once. Men who had bet against her, and men who had bet for her, men who had laughed at her on day one, and men who had gone silent when she caught the calibration trick. All of them on their feet shouting because they had just watched an 18-year-old girl do the thing that legends were made of the shot. The barracks talked about like a mountain that killed climbers, and she had made it at the end of a course that had broken combat veterans bleeding from her forearm, with the man who hated her whispering permission to fail into a loudspeaker. Elena lifted her head from the rifle slowly. She did not smile. She did not raise a fist. She followed through the way she always did, and only when she was certain the shot was complete did she rise from her position, and she stood, and she looked out at the 1,300-meter target one more time, and something in her face was quiet and complete. It was 7:04 in the morning. And at the scoring station, Sergeant Vargas stood frozen with his clipboard, and everyone watching turned slowly to look at him because the moment had come, the moment they had all been waiting for since he walked back onto the base that morning. The hit was confirmed by the sensor. It was confirmed by the second range officer. It was confirmed by every pair of eyes and ears on the ridge. There was nothing left to lie about. And now the man who had built his whole day around calling her shots as misses had to key the loudspeaker and say the word. Vargas did not key the loudspeaker. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. The roar of the crowd faded into a tense waiting quiet because everyone understood what was happening. He wasn't confirming it. He was standing there, staring at his clipboard, and he was not saying the word. Confirm the hit, Sergeant, Holloway said. He said it quietly, but the whole staging area heard it. Vargas looked up. His face had gone gray. The sensor could be malfunctioning, he said. At that range in that heat, a sensor reading isn't reliable. I didn't see the strike myself. Regulations state the senior range officer must visually confirm. Every other range officer confirmed it, Holloway said, and he was walking toward the scoring station, slow and deliberate. The sensor confirmed it. 30 men on that ridge heard the steel ring. Are you telling me, Sergeant, that you're the only person on this base who didn't see a hit that everyone else saw? I'm telling you, the regulations require visual confirmation from the senior officer. And I did not get clean visual confirmation, and therefore, under the rules, I cannot score it as a... Stop. Holloway had reached the scoring station now, and he stood in front of Vargas, and his voice dropped so low that only the men closest could hear it. But those men would repeat it later. All of them, word for word. I know what you're doing. Everybody here knows what you're doing. You've hated this girl since the day she caught you, and you came back today for one reason, to find a way to take from her the one thing she earned in front of all of us. And you found your loophole, visual confirmation. You're going to hang her 1,300-meter shot on a technicality because you'd rather burn your own name to the ground than to watch a teenager beat you clean. I'm not finished. Holloway's voice never rose, and that was what made it terrible. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to key that loudspeaker and you're going to confirm the hit because it was a hit. And every honest person here knows it was a hit. And if you try to hang this on visual confirmation, then I am going to stand in front of regional command and I am going to tell them exactly what you did with that weapons log 10 days ago, the forged signature, the tower footage, all of it. And I am going to make it my personal mission for the rest of my career to make sure everyone in this business knows the name Vargas belongs to a man who tried to frame a child. Do you understand me? The two men stared at each other. It was 7:06 in the morning and the whole base was watching, and Vargas's hand holding the clipboard had begun to shake. And then from the back of the crowd, a voice spoke, not loud, but it carried the way certain voices carry the voices of men who have spent a lifetime being listened to. Confirm the shot, Sergeant. Every head turned. Daniel Marlowe stepped forward from the edge of the staging area where he had stood silent through the entire trial, and he walked toward the scoring station with the unhurried, deliberate pace that his daughter had inherited from him, and the crowd parted for him without quite knowing why, because there was something in the way he moved that told you this was not a man to stand in front of. Elena at the firing line went very still. Dad, she said. It was the first time all morning her voice had cracked. She had not known he was there. He had come 1,200 miles and stood in silence so as not to break her focus, and she had made the shot of her life, not knowing her father was watching, and now he was walking through the crowd toward the man who had tried to destroy her, and something in her chest broke open. Daniel Marlowe stopped in front of the scoring station beside Holloway, and he looked at Vargas, and his gray eyes were calm and terrible. My name is Daniel Marlowe, he said. That's my daughter. I trained her, and I drove through the night to be here, and I stood in the back, and I kept my mouth shut through the whole trial, because the one thing you never do to a shooter in the moment before the shot is give them something new to notice. So I waited, same as she waited. He paused. But the shot's done now, so I'll speak. He looked at the clipboard in Vargas's shaking hand. I spent 30 years in military intelligence, Daniel said. 30 years watching men make exactly the choice you're making right now. The choice to protect your pride instead of tell the truth. And I'll tell you what I learned in 30 years, Sergeant. It never works. It never once works. Because the truth doesn't need you to confirm it. The steel already rang. 30 men heard it. The sensor logged it. Your daughter's grandchildren will hear the story of that shot someday, and your name won't be in it because nobody remembers the man who tried to deny a thing that everybody saw. They just remember that he tried. He leaned in and his voice dropped. You have about 5 seconds left to decide how you want to be remembered. Confirm the shot, and you're a hard man who called it straight in the end. Deny it, and you're the coward who lied about a child shot in front of the whole base, and that's the only thing anyone will ever say about you again. 5 seconds. Choose. The silence was absolute. Vargas looked at Daniel Marlowe. He looked at Holloway. He looked out at the crowd, 30 men and more, every one of them watching him, and he looked finally at Elena, standing at the firing line, with blood dried on her forearm, and her father's eyes, and something in him, some last calculation, ran out of road. He keyed the loudspeaker. Hit confirmed, he said. His voice was hollow. 1,300 meters. Dead center. Candidate Marlowe has completed the final trial with 5 hits out of 5 engagements. No misses. He set the clipboard down on the scoring table like it weighed 100 pounds. The trial is concluded. The base erupted again, louder this time, and it was 7:08 in the morning, and Elena Marlowe had done it. She had completed the hardest trial in the region without a single miss. And the man who had come back to destroy her had been made in the end to speak the truth out loud in front of everyone. But Elena was not listening to the crowd. She was walking toward her father. She crossed the staging area, and the men fell back to let her through, and she came to a stop in front of Daniel Marlowe. And for a moment, the two of them just looked at each other. The man who had poured his whole life into his daughter, and the daughter who had just proven that the life had not been poured in vain. You came, she said quietly. I couldn't stay away, Daniel said. I told you not to come. I begged you not to. And then the morning you left, I stood in that driveway and I watched the truck disappear. And I went back in the house and I lasted about 4 hours before I got in the car. His voice was rough. I've been driving for 2 days. I got here an hour ago. I stood in the back so I wouldn't distract you. He shook his head slowly and his eyes were wet. I didn't want you to come here because I was afraid of what these men would do to you. I was afraid they'd break something in you that I spent 18 years building. And instead, he stopped. He couldn't finish. Instead, I broke them, Elena said gently. Instead, you broke them, Daniel agreed, and a laugh came out of him that was half a sob. God help me, Elena. I have never in my life been so scared and so proud at the same time. And then in front of the whole base, in front of the men who had laughed at her on day one, and the commander who had thrown her file at her feet, and the sergeant who had tried to frame her, Daniel Marlowe pulled his daughter into his arms and held her hard the way you hold something you were afraid you had lost. And Elena, who had been calm and unbreakable, and without fear through every impossible thing the desert had thrown at her, finally let something go. And she held on to her father, and she did not let go for a long time. It was 7:11 in the morning, and around them, the base had gone quiet again. But it was a different quiet now, a respectful one, the quiet of hard men watching something true. Holloway gave them their moment, and then he walked over and he cleared his throat, and Daniel and Elena stepped apart. Mr. Marlowe, Holloway said. He extended his hand. Nathan Holloway, I run this program. He paused. I owe your daughter an apology, and I've already given her one, but I'll give it to you too because I think a father should hear it. On her first morning, I threw her file at her feet. I called her a child. I told her the desert would swallow her whole. He shook his head. I've been doing this for 26 years, and I have never been more wrong about a person in my life. She's the best natural shooter I've ever put through this program. And it's not the shooting, really. Anybody can be taught to shoot. It's the other thing, the patience, the way she reads the world, the way she's never surprised. He looked at Daniel. That came from you. Daniel shook his hand. That came from 30 years of watching people die because they didn't see things coming, he said quietly. I couldn't save them, so I did the one thing I could do. I made sure my daughter would always see. He looked at Elena. I just didn't know until about 10 minutes ago whether it had worked, whether I'd given her a gift or a burden. His voice caught. Turns out it's a gift. It's both, Dad, Elena said softly. It was always both, but I wouldn't trade it. Not for anything. She looked at him. You gave me your whole life. The least I could do was use it. There was a moment then between the three of them that none of them would ever quite be able to describe afterward, a moment where the whole long story seemed to close a circle. The tired man who had poured himself into a little girl, the little girl who had grown into the shooter, who beat the desert, and the hard commander who had watched it happen and been changed by it. And then Vargas walked up. The crowd tensed. Kessler took a step forward without thinking. But Vargas was not carrying his clipboard anymore, and something in his face had changed, and he stopped a few feet away, and for a moment he could not seem to find his voice. Marlowe, he said finally. He was looking at Elena. I came back here today to fail you. I'm not going to pretend otherwise because everybody here knows it, and pretending would just be one more lie. His jaw worked. You made the shot anyway, all five. And when I stood there trying to find a way to take it from you, you didn't beg. You didn't argue. You just made the shot so clean, there was nothing left for me to lie about. He shook his head slowly. I've been running candidates out of this program for years, telling myself I was protecting it. And a teenager off a truck just showed me in front of everyone that I was never protecting anything. I was just scared that someone would come along who was better than me and I wouldn't be the best anymore. He looked at the ground and then he made himself look back up. I'm sorry for the log, for today, for all of it. You earned this, and you earned it against me trying to stop you, which means you earned it twice. He extended his hand. It was shaking. I don't expect you to take it. Elena looked at his hand. She looked at his face. And the crowd waited because this was the man who had forged her signature, who had tried to frame her, who had come back to burn her shot on a technicality, and no one would have blamed her for turning away. But Elena Marlowe had been raised by a man who understood something about broken people that most people never learn. She took his hand. My father taught me something a long time ago, she said, shaking it. He said the ones who fight you hardest are usually the ones who are most afraid of what you make them feel about themselves. He said don't hate them for it. Just don't let them win. She let go of his hand. You didn't win, Sergeant. But I don't hate you, and if you meant that apology, then it wasn't a total loss for either of us today. Vargas stared at her, and something moved across his hard face, something that might have been the beginning of a different man. And he nodded once, and he turned and walked away, and he did not come back. And later, much later, people would say that was the day Vargas started to change, and that it started because an 18-year-old girl shook his shaking hand when she had every right to leave it hanging in the air. It was 7:19 in the morning. Daniel Marlowe watched Vargas go, and then he looked at his daughter with an expression Elena had rarely seen on his face, something close to wonder. "I taught you to shake his hand," he said quietly, "but I never taught you to mean it. That part was you." Elena looked at her father. "You taught me all of it, Dad," she said, "even the parts you didn't know you were teaching." Holloway cleared his throat again. He seemed to be doing that a lot this morning, a hard man not quite sure how to hold this much feeling. "There's going to be a formal record of this trial," he said. "The 5 hits, the 1,300-meter shot, the whole thing, and I want you to know, Marlowe, that record's going to follow you for the rest of your career in the best possible way. Do you understand what you did today? You didn't just pass, you set a mark. Candidates are going to be trying to beat your 1,300-meter shot for years, and most of them are never going to do it." He paused. "You're the youngest person ever to complete this trial clean. Ever, in the entire history of the program." Elena took that in quietly. "That's not the part I care about," she said. "I figured you'd say that," Holloway said, and he almost smiled. "So what's the part you care about?" Elena thought about it the way she thought about everything without hurry. "The part I care about," she said slowly, "is that this morning when I walked to that firing line, 40 men were betting I'd fail, most of them. And by the time I walked off it, they weren't laughing anymore. Not because I told them not to, not because I demanded their respect. I never said a word about it." She looked out at the crowd, at the men who had come to watch her fall and stayed to watch her rise. "They stopped laughing because I gave them a reason to. That's the only kind of respect that's worth anything, Colonel. The kind you earn so completely that the person has no choice but to give it to you. You can't ask for that kind. You can only earn it." She paused. "My father taught me that too." "He taught you a lot," Holloway said. "He taught me everything that matters," Elena said. "And the world spent this whole week trying to tell me it wasn't enough, that I was too young, too small, too new, that the things my father gave me couldn't possibly stand up to real experience, real combat, real years in the field." She looked at Daniel, "And it turned out the things my father gave me were exactly enough, more than enough. It turned out that patience beats panic and observation beats reaction, and the person who refuses to hurry beats the person who's been doing it for 20 years every single time." Her voice was steady and clear. "That's the thing I care about, Colonel. Not the record. The proof. The proof that what my father spent his life building actually works." Daniel Marlowe turned away for a moment. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, and he did not try to hide it. It was 7:24 in the morning, and the sun was climbing, and the desert that had broken so many better men had for once met someone it could not break. Kessler came over then, and he stood beside Elena, and he looked at Daniel Marlowe with something like awe. "You're the guy who called the ambush 3 days out," he said. "Aren't you? The one my squad leader used to talk about." Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "I called a lot of ambushes," he said. "I don't remember which one your squad leader meant. He said nobody believed you, and then it happened exactly the way you said, right down to the hour." "That happened more than once," Daniel said quietly. "And it never got easier. Being right about something terrible and having no one listen." He looked at his daughter. "That's part of why I trained her the way I did. I wanted her to be so undeniable that no one would ever be able to not listen. I was tired of being right and ignored. I wanted to build someone the world would have to hear." He shook his head. "I just never imagined I'd get to watch it happen. I thought I'd be gone before anyone believed her. And instead, I'm standing here and 30 men just watched her make a shot they'll talk about for years, and every one of them believes her now." His voice broke. "Do you know what that's like, to spend your whole life not being heard and then watch your child be heard by everyone?" Nobody answered him because there was no answer and none was needed. Elena put her arm around her father. "They hear you now, Dad," she said. "Every shot I made this morning, that was you. That was 30 years of you finally landing where people could see it. You weren't ignored today. You were the loudest thing on this whole base. They just didn't know your name yet." She looked out at the crowd. "But they know it now." And it was true, because the story that would travel out from Red Canyon that day would not just be the story of a teenage girl who beat the desert. It would be the story of the father who made her the tired intelligence man who spent his retirement pouring everything he knew into a 6-year-old, the man everyone thought was to be pitied, a brilliant mind with no one left to teach but a little girl. And the little girl had grown up and walked into the hardest trial in the region and proven shot by shot that the man had not wasted his life at all, that he had in fact done the smartest and most loving thing a person can do, which is to take everything you have learned at great cost and give it freely and completely to someone you love so that they will never have to pay the price you paid. It was 7:31 in the morning when Holloway called the base to order and made it official standing at the scoring station where Vargas had stood, and this time the loudspeaker carried something true. Candidate Elena Marlowe, he said, has completed the final trial of this program with a perfect score, 5 engagements, 5 hits, no misses, including a confirmed strike at 1,300 meters, the longest confirmed shot by any candidate in the history of this trial. He paused, and his voice, the voice of a hard man who had thrown her file at her feet 10 days ago, softened. She is the youngest person ever to complete this trial, and she did it clean, and she did it against obstacles that would have broken candidates twice her age. I have been running this program for 26 years, and I have never been prouder to put my name to a record. Congratulations, Marlowe. You earned every inch of it. The base erupted one more time, and this time Elena let herself smile small and real, standing between her father and the commander who had learned to respect her, and the roar of the men rolled out across the desert and faded into the boiling morning air. And somewhere in the middle of that roar, Daniel Marlowe leaned close to his daughter's ear, and he said the thing he had driven 1,200 miles to say, the thing he had been holding since the morning he watched the truck disappear from the driveway. I was wrong to try to keep you home, he said. I wanted to protect you from the world, but you didn't need protecting from the world, Elena. The world needed protecting from you. He laughed wet and proud. You go on out there and you make them see, all of them, everyone who ever looked at you and saw a child. You make them see exactly what you are. Elena turned and looked at her father, the man who had given her his whole life, and she said the only thing there was to say. I already have Dad, she said quietly, this morning, and I'm just getting started. It was 7:34 in the morning, in the brutal Arizona desert, and the girl they had called just a teen sniper stood at the center of a base full of men who would never laugh at her again, with her father's hand on her shoulder and her father's gift in her hands and her whole life stretching out ahead of her. And for the first time since she had stepped off that transport into 40 men's laughter, Elena Marlowe was exactly where she had always known she would be. Not because anyone had believed in her first, but because she had never once needed them to. The months after the trial did not slow down for Elena Marlowe, and she had not expected them to. Word of the 1,300-meter shot traveled faster and farther than anyone at Red Canyon had imagined. Within a week, people who had never set foot in Arizona were talking about the 18-year-old who had walked into the hardest trial in the region and finished it clean against a course that broke veterans, against a range officer who tried to fail her, against a whole base that had bet on her collapse. And the story, the way stories do, grew a life of its own. But the strange thing, the thing that Elena kept noticing, was that no matter how big the story got, the part people cared about most was never the shooting. It was her father. They keep asking about you, she told Daniel one evening on the phone 3 weeks after the trial. She had stayed on at the base and he had gone home to Yuma, and they talked every night the way they always had. Every single person. They ask about the shot, and then they ask, but who trained her? And when I tell them, when I say my father, a retired intelligence man who worked with me since I was 6, their whole face changes, like the shot suddenly makes sense to them. She paused. You spent your whole life feeling invisible, Dad, and now you're the first question everyone asks. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what to do with that, Daniel admitted finally. His voice was rough. 58 years old, and I finally get heard, and it's not for anything I did. It's for you. It's for both of us, Elena said gently. It's for the both of us together. That's how it was always supposed to work. She heard him breathe on the other end of the line, and she knew he was struggling with it. This man who had spent decades being right and ignored, now suddenly being sought out. And she understood that being finally seen after a lifetime of invisibility is its own kind of overwhelming. You okay? I'm okay, Daniel said. I just keep thinking about all those years. The empty afternoons in that field near Yuma. You sitting in the heat doing nothing while I watch the wind with you. Some of the neighbors thought I was crazy, you know that, a grown man making his little girl sit in 110 degrees day after day watching the air move. He laughed quietly. One of them actually called somebody once, wanted to check that I wasn't hurting you. That's how it looked from the outside. Elena went still. You never told me that. I didn't want you to feel strange about it, Daniel said. You were happy out there. You loved it. You loved the quiet. You loved figuring out the puzzles. You loved that it was just the two of us in the desert. But the world looked at it and saw something to worry about. His voice hardened just slightly. The world's always going to look at the thing that makes you exceptional and try to make you feel strange about it, Elena. Remember that. The very thing that made you unbeatable on that range is the thing your neighbors called somebody about. That's not a contradiction. That's just how it works. The world doesn't understand greatness while it's being built. It only recognizes it after it's finished. Elena carried those words with her for a long time, because here was the twist that the base and later the wider world was slow to understand. Elena had not become exceptional at Red Canyon. She had walked in exceptional. The trial had not made her. It had only revealed her. And the thing that revealed her was the same thing that for 18 years had made her look strange, isolated, over disciplined odd. The patience that beat the desert was the patience that made her sit alone in a field while other kids played. The observation that caught the forged signature was the observation that made her quiet and watchful in rooms full of laughing people. Everything the world had looked at sideways for 18 years turned out to be the exact thing that made her unbeatable. And that Elena came to understand was the real lesson. Not that a teenager could beat trained soldiers, but that the qualities the world tries to correct out of you when you're young are so often the qualities that will one day make you undeniable if you only refuse to let anyone correct them out of you first. She thought about that a lot in the months that followed. Holloway kept her on at the base first as a candidate, finishing the program, then in a role that had never quite existed before, something between a student and an instructor. Because the strange truth was that Elena had things to teach even the experienced men. Things about patience, about reading the environment, about the discipline of the weight, and Holloway was not too proud to see it. I've been running this program for 26 years, he told her one afternoon about 2 months after the trial. They were standing at the range watching a class of candidates struggle through their first long-distance shots. And I taught them all the same way. Push them hard, break them down, see who survives. That's how it was done to me, and that's how I did it. He watched a candidate rush a shot and miss badly. And then you walked in and you showed me that the whole philosophy might be backward. You weren't broken down. You were built up, slow, patient, for years, by somebody who loved you. He shook his head. I've been breaking men for 26 years, Marlowe, and you made me wonder if I've been doing the opposite of what actually works. Elena watched the candidates. It's not that breaking is wrong, she said carefully. It's that breaking only works on people who were built right in the first place. You can't break someone down to their foundation if there's no foundation there. All you do is leave a pile of pieces. She nodded toward the struggling candidate. That man out there isn't failing because he's weak. He's failing because nobody ever taught him how to wait. He's got courage. He's got strength. But he was never given the one thing that matters most, which is patience. And you can't break patience into a person. You can only build it, slowly, the way my father built it into me. Holloway was quiet for a moment. Would you teach it? He asked finally. The waiting, the patience, would you teach that to these men? Elena looked at him. You want an 18-year-old to teach patience to combat veterans. I want the person who beat my hardest trial to teach the thing that let her beat it, Holloway said. I don't care how old you are. I stopped caring about that the morning you caught the calibration trick. He paused. That was my mistake from day one, Marlowe. I looked at your age, and I decided it told me who you were. And your whole life since then has been one long lesson in how wrong that was. So no, I don't care that you're 18. I care that you know something. My program's been missing for 26 years, and I'd be a fool to let it walk out the door because of a number on a form. And so Elena stayed and she taught, and the men who had laughed at her on her first day found themselves months later sitting in the dirt beside her, learning to read the wind off a strand of dry grass, learning to wait, learning the thing her father had spent his life learning and had given to her freely and which she now gave to them. But it was not easy, and it did not happen all at once. and the first weeks of teaching nearly broke something in her that the desert never could. Because the men did not want to sit still. "This is a waste of time," one of them said the third day, a big candidate named Boyd, who had come from an infantry background and thought he already knew everything about being a soldier. "We'd have been sitting in the dirt for 3 hours, Marlowe. 3 hours. Watching grass. When do we shoot?" "When you can tell me what the grass is telling you," Elena said calmly. "The grass isn't telling me anything. It's grass." "Then you're not ready to shoot," Elena said. "Sit back down." Boyd did not sit back down. He stood over her, and he was twice her size, and there was contempt in his face, the old contempt, the one she had walked into on her very first day. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you got lucky on that trial. I think everybody's built you up into this legend. And the truth is you made a couple of good shots, and now you're teaching us to sit in the dirt because you don't actually have anything to teach." The other candidates went silent. This was the challenge. Everyone had been waiting for the moment someone said out loud what a few of them had privately wondered. Elena Marlowe was 18. She had beaten one trial, and now she was their teacher. Some part of every one of them had resented it. Elena rose slowly to her feet. She was a full head shorter than Boyd. She did not look intimidated. She never looked intimidated. "You want to know if I have anything to teach you," she said. "Fair enough, let's find out." She pointed downrange to a target at 600 meters barely visible in the afternoon heat. "There's a target out there, 600 meters. I want you to hit it. Right now, don't wait. Don't watch the wind. Do it the way you want to do it fast, the way your whole body is telling you to. Show me I've got nothing to teach." Boyd hesitated. Right now, prove me wrong." Boyd got down behind a rifle. He was good, actually. He had years of experience. He settled in fast the way infantry shooters do, and he fired within seconds. The round kicked up dirt 3 feet right of the target. "Wind pulled you," Elena said quietly. "You didn't see it. There's a crosswind at 400 meters that isn't at 600. You shot straight through it because you were in a hurry to prove something." She knelt beside him. "Now do it again. But this time watch the grass at 400 meters first. The little strand off to the left. Watch which way it bends. Then tell me where the wind is." Boyd grudgingly looked. He watched the grass. "Bending left," he said. "So the wind's coming from the right, which means I aim right of the target. How far?" Boyd hesitated. "I don't know." "That's the whole thing," Elena said. "That's what the 3 hours of sitting in the dirt is for. You don't know how far because you never learned to feel it. So you're going to sit and you're going to watch that grass day after day until the distance the wind pulls around is something you feel in your gut without doing the math. And the day you feel it, you'll hit that target every time in any wind, and you'll wonder how you ever shot without knowing it." She stood. "Take the correction I gave you. Aim 2 feet right. Fire." Boyd fired. The steel rang. He stared at the target for a long moment. Then he looked up at Elena, and the contempt was gone from his face, replaced by something else. Something closer to the dawning respect she had seen on so many faces over the months. "How much wind was that?" he said quietly. "Enough to make you miss by 3 feet if you don't see it," Elena said. "And you'll never see it if you're in a hurry. That's the lesson, Boyd. That's the whole lesson. The wind is always talking. Most people are too busy to listen." She looked at him. "You want to know if I have anything to teach you? I just did. Now sit back down and watch the grass." Boyd sat back down, and he watched the grass, and he did not complain again. It was a small victory, but it mattered because word of it spread, and after that the candidates stopped questioning why the 18-year-old was teaching them, and they started listening, and slowly over the weeks, something began to change at Red Canyon. Kessler was the first to ask her to teach him properly. He came to her about 10 weeks after the trial, and he was awkward about it, this hard sergeant asking an 18-year-old for lessons. "I've been shooting for 15 years, he said, "and I watched you do things out there I've never been able to do. And I keep telling myself it's talent. It's just natural talent. Some people have it, but that's not it is. That's the lie I've been telling myself, so I don't have to do the hard work." He looked at her. "It's not talent, it's the waiting. You wait in a way I've never learned how to, and I want to learn it. If you're willing to teach me." Elena studied him. "It's going to be uncomfortable," she said. "It's going to feel like doing nothing. Your whole body is going to scream at you to act, to shoot, to move, and I'm going to make you sit still and watch instead." It's the hardest thing I know how to teach because everything in a person fights against it. You up for that? After what I watched you do out there? Kessler said, I'll sit in the dirt and watch the wind for a year if that's what it takes. It won't take a year, Elena said, but it'll take longer than you want it to. That's the first lesson. It always takes longer than you want. And the moment you decide you've waited long enough, that's the exact moment you've failed. She almost smiled. My father used to say, patience isn't waiting until you feel ready. Patience is waiting after you feel ready because the feeling of being ready is a liar. And the desert punishes people who trust it. And so she taught him, and she taught the others who came after him. And slowly over the months, something began to change at Red Canyon. The program that had broken men for 26 years began to build them instead. Not all at once. But the seed had been planted by an 18-year-old girl and the tired intelligence man who had made her, and it began quietly to grow. But the real turn in the story, the thing that would define what came next, arrived about 4 months after the trial on an ordinary afternoon in the form of a phone call. Holloway found Elena at the range and told her someone from Regional Command wanted to speak with her. She took the call in his office, and when she came out, her face was unreadable in the way it got when she was processing something large. What is it? Holloway asked. They want me to go operational, Elena said quietly. Not the program anymore. The real thing. They said my scores, the trial, the way I read environments, they said they have never seen a candidate like me, and they want to fast-track me into an actual operational role. She sat down slowly. They want to send me to places, real places, to do the real thing. Holloway was quiet for a moment. That's the offer every candidate dreams of, he said carefully. That's the top of the mountain. Most people who come through here would give anything for that call. I know, but you don't look like someone who just got the call she dreamed of. Elena looked at him, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked uncertain. Not afraid. Elena was never quite afraid, but uncertain in a way he had never seen. I have to call my father, she said. She called Daniel that night, and she told him everything, and there was a long silence on the other end of the line, longer than any silence they had ever shared. Dad, she said finally. I'm here, Daniel said. His voice was strange. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Say what? Elena. He took a breath. Do you remember why I trained you, not the surface reason? The real one. Do you remember what I told you the trial was for? To prove I could, Elena said. To make the world see. No, Daniel said quietly. That was your reason. That was never mine. He paused. I trained you the way I did because I watched people die for 30 years, Elena. People who didn't see it coming. And it broke something in me that I told you about. And I decided the one thing I could do with the rest of my life was make sure my daughter would always see, so that nothing could ever take her by surprise, so that the world could never do to you what it did to those people. His voice cracked. I didn't train you to send you into the exact places where those people died. I trained you so you'd never have to go there. Elena went very still. I know I can't stop you, Daniel said. You're 18, you're an adult. This is your choice, and I raised you to make your own choices, and I would never take that from you. His voice was thick now. But you asked me what I think, so I'm going to tell you, even though it's the hardest thing I've ever had to say. I don't want you to go operational, Elena. Not because you can't. God knows you can. You're better than anyone I ever served with. But because I spent 18 years making you into someone who could survive that world, and now that you can, I find that what I actually want more than anything is for you to never have to. There was a long silence. That's the twist I never saw coming in my own life, Daniel said, and he laughed, but it was a broken sound. I built the perfect weapon, and now that it's built, I don't want to fire it. I want to keep it home. I want you to teach. I want you to build others the way I built you. I want you to take everything I gave you and give it to people who need it in a classroom on a range somewhere safe, instead of taking it into the dark where I can't follow. His voice dropped to almost nothing. But that's what I want. It's not what you have to do, and I will love you and be proud of you no matter what you choose. I need you to know that first, before you decide anything. There is no version of this where I am not proud of you. Elena sat in the dark for a long time after they hung up. And here was where the story turned, where the girl who had beaten the desert faced the hardest decision of her life, harder than any shot because there was no wind to read. No pattern to wait for, no clear target. 1,300 meters out. There was only a choice between two futures, and the man she loved most in the world had just told her at great cost that he wanted her to choose the safer one while also promising to be proud of her if she didn't. She thought about it for 3 days. She did not hurry. Of course she did not hurry. She had never hurried anything in her life, and she was not going to hurry this. She sat with it. She watched it the way she watched the wind from every angle, waiting for the pattern to show itself. On the second day, Kessler found her sitting alone at the edge of the range, watching the sun go down, and he sat beside her without asking. "You're wrestling with something," he said. "The whole base can feel it." "Reginald Command offered me an operational role," Elena said. She saw no reason to hide it from him. The real thing. Fast-tracked. Kessler let out a low whistle. "That's everything. That's what all of us came here hoping for." He looked at her. "And you're sitting here at sundown looking like somebody died." "Why, because my father doesn't want me to take it," Elena said. "And it's the first time in my whole life he's ever told me not to do something I was good at." Kessler was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "As somebody who took every operational role they ever offered me for 15 years until I ended up here teaching instead, please, the mountain you're looking at the top of it, the thing everybody says is everything." Kessler shook his head slowly. "It's real, it matters, and some people are meant to climb it, and I don't regret climbing it. But I'll tell you what nobody tells you when you're 18 and they're offering you the world." He looked out at the desert. "Every friend I made out there doing the real thing, I can count on one hand how many of them made it to my age. And I think about that every single day. I think about all that talent, all that training, all those good people, and how much of it just ended out there in the dark and never got passed on to anybody." He turned to her. "You know what I'd give Marlowe to have taken half of what those people knew and put it into the next generation instead of burying it with them. You've got a father who wants you to do exactly that. Don't be so quick to think he's holding you back. Maybe he's the only one seeing clearly." Elena looked at him for a long time. "You sound like him," she said quietly. "Maybe your father and I finally figured out the same thing," Kessler said. "Just from opposite ends of it. He figured it out watching people die in intelligence. I figured it out watching people die in the field. Same lesson. The knowledge is the thing that matters. The knowledge is the only thing that outlives you." He stood up. "Whatever you decide, kid, you'll decide it right. You always do. But don't let anybody, including yourself, make you think that teaching is the small choice and the field is the big one. Sometimes it's exactly the other way around." And he walked away, leaving her with the sunset and the words. And on the third day, she went to find Holloway. "I've made my decision," she said. Holloway set down what he was doing. "Regional Command needs an answer soon." "I know. I'm giving it to you first." She sat down across from him. "I'm turning down the operational role." Holloway was quiet. He had not expected that. "Marlowe, that's the top of the mountain. That's what everyone—" "I know what it is," Elena said. "And a part of me wants it. The part of me that's spent 18 years being told I'm too young, too small, too new. That part wants to go out there and prove it at the highest level there is." She leaned forward. "But my father taught me something a long time ago, Colonel, and it took me 18 years and one phone call to finally understand it. He taught me the difference between what you can do and what you should do. And they're not the same thing. The desert is full of people who did everything they could do right up until the thing they could do killed them." She paused. "My father spent 30 years watching people die because they couldn't see what was coming," she said. "And he trained me so I would always see. And you know what I see now? I see that if I go operational, I take everything he gave me, everything he spent his whole life building, and I carry it into the exact place where the people he couldn't save died. I take his life's work and I gamble it on a dark road somewhere, and maybe I come home and maybe I don't. And if I don't, then everything he gave me dies with me in the dark, unheard, exactly the way he always feared his own knowledge would die." Her voice was steady and clear. "But if I stay, if I teach, then everything he gave me doesn't die. It multiplies. It goes into every candidate I train. It goes into Kessler, and it goes into the men who laughed at me, and it goes into people I haven't even met yet, and it keeps going long after I'm gone. My father's whole life, everything he learned at such a terrible cost, doesn't end with me. It spreads through me to everyone. Holloway looked at her for a long time. "You're 18 years old," he said quietly, "and you just made a decision that most people twice your age would never have the wisdom to make." "No," Elena said. "I made a decision my father spent 18 years making me capable of making." "That's the difference, Colonel. I didn't get wise on my own. He built the wisdom into me one empty afternoon at a time. All I did was finally use it." She stood. "I want to teach. I want to take the thing that beat the desert and give it to as many people as I can for as long as I can. That's my answer. That's what I'm going to do with everything he gave me." Holloway stood too, and he extended his hand across the desk, and there was something in his face that had not been there 4 months ago, on the morning he threw her file at her feet. "When you first walked onto this base," he said, "I looked at you and I saw a child, a publicity stunt, a mistake somebody upstairs made. And I told you the desert would swallow you whole." He shook her hand. "I've spent 4 months being wrong about you in every possible way. Marlowe, and I've decided I'm going to keep being wrong because being wrong about you has been the best thing that's happened to this program in 26 years. You've got a home here for as long as you want it. And every candidate that walks through those gates is going to be better because you stayed. I'll make sure of it." "Thank you, Colonel." "Don't thank me," Holloway said. "Thank your father. I just run the program. He built the person who's about to change it." He paused. "You know, I never did meet Danny Marlowe properly. That day at the trial, everything happened so fast. I'd like to. Before I retire, I'd like to shake the hand of the man who made the best shooter I ever trained." Elena smiled. "He'd like that," she said. "He doesn't get many people wanting to shake his hand. He's spent his whole life being the man nobody listened to." "Well," Holloway said, "those days are over." And she called her father that night, and she told him her decision, and there was a silence on the other end of the line, and then she heard the sound of a 58-year-old man crying quietly, 1,200 miles away, a man who had spent his whole life being right and ignored being invisible, being pitied, and who had just learned that his daughter had chosen to spend her life making sure his life's work would outlive them both. "I didn't ask you to do this for me," Daniel managed finally. "I know you didn't," Elena said gently. "I'm not doing it for you, Dad. I'm doing it because you were right. You've always been right. That's been the tragedy of your whole life, that you were right and no one listened. So I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to make sure everyone else listens too by teaching them the thing you tried to teach a world that wouldn't hear you." Her voice softened. "You're not going to be invisible anymore, Dad. Dad, every person I teach for the rest of my life is going to learn something you discovered. Your name might not be on it, but it'll be you. It'll always be you, and it'll go on long after both of us are gone." Daniel could not speak for a while. "I spent my whole life afraid I'd die with everything still locked up inside me," he said, finally, his voice breaking. "All those things I learned, all those things I saw, and no one to give them to but a little girl in a field near Yuma. And I thought when I'm gone it all goes with me. Everything I paid for, everything I bled for, gone." He was crying openly now. "And instead you're telling me it's going to outlive me by 50 years, 100. That the things I learned are going to be in the heads of people who aren't even born yet." "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Elena said. "Then it was worth it," Daniel said. "All of it. Every terrible thing I saw, every person I couldn't save, every night I couldn't sleep. If it turns into this, if it turns into you standing on a range teaching 100 people to see the way I taught you to see, then it was worth it. My whole life was worth it." He laughed through the tears. "You gave me that, Elena. You gave your old man the one thing he never thought he'd have. You gave me the proof that my life mattered." And there in that phone call on an ordinary night, 4 months after the desert, the real story finally revealed itself. The story underneath the story, the one that had been true all along, beneath the tale of a teenage girl who beat trained soldiers. It had never really been a story about shooting. It had been a story about a father and a daughter, and about the thing a parent gives a child when they give them everything they know, and about how that gift, if the child is brave enough and wise enough to use it right, does not just make the child great, it makes the parent immortal. A month later, Daniel Marlowe drove back to Red Canyon, and this time Elena was waiting for him at the gate, and this time there was no trial, no crowd, no man trying to fail her. There was just a father and a daughter and a base full of people who wanted finally to shake his hand. Holloway met him first. "Mr. Marlowe," he said, "Nathan Holloway. We met briefly at the trial, but everything was chaos that day, and I never got to say what I wanted to say." He shook Daniel's hand and held it. I've trained hundreds of shooters over 26 years. Broke most of them down and built a few of them back up, and I thought I understood how you make someone great. And then your daughter walked onto my base and showed me I'd had it backward my whole career. He paused. You didn't break her down and build her back up. You just built her up, slow, patient, for 18 years, with nothing but love and discipline and empty afternoons in a field, and she's better than anyone I ever made the hard way. I wanted you to hear that from me. You did something I never figured out how to do, and you did it with your own child. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I didn't know if it would work, he admitted. For 18 years, I didn't know. I just knew I loved her, and I knew what I'd learned, and I knew I didn't want it to die with me. So I gave it to her, and I hoped. His eyes were wet. You're the first person who ever told me it worked. Do you understand that 18 years and you're the first? Then let me be the first of many, Holloway said. Because everyone on this base knows your name now, and they're going to keep knowing it long after you and I are both gone, because your daughter's going to make sure of it. And Daniel Marlowe stood at the gate of Red Canyon, an old intelligence man who had spent his whole life being ignored, and he watched the candidates his daughter was training move across the range in the distance, patient, watchful, unhurried, carrying his life's work in their hands, without even knowing his name, and he understood finally that he had not wasted his life at all. He had multiplied it, through her, into all of them, forever. Alina Marlowe stayed at Red Canyon, and she taught, and over the years that followed, she became something the program had never had before, a legend, not for what she did in the field, but for what she built in the men and women who passed through her hands. The candidates who trained under her went on to save lives, to see things coming that would have killed them to wait. When everyone around them panicked, and every single one of them was caring, though most of them never knew it, the life's work of a tired intelligence man named Daniel Marlowe, who had spent 30 years being ignored and then spent the rest of his life pouring everything he knew into a little girl in a field near Yuma. They had called her just a teen sniper. They had laughed when she stepped off the transport. They had thrown her file at her feet and told her the desert would swallow her whole. And the girl they laughed at did not just survive the desert. She conquered it alone in front of every man who doubted her. And then she did the thing that mattered far more than any shot she ever made. She took everything her father gave her, everything the world had ignored, everything that made her strange and isolated and undeniable, and she gave it away freely to everyone who came after her, so that a good man's life would never be forgotten and a good man's knowledge would never die. Because that is what real strength is. It is not age. It is not reputation. It is not the applause of the people who doubted you. Real strength is what you choose to do with the gift you were given. Alina Marlowe was given the greatest gift a father ever gave a daughter, and she made it last forever.